I was number one, but I'm not good enough. It's tiring since I was 12 years old. I had to do daily practices like visualization, breathing techniques, taking time to be in the present, thinking about some words that gets you back on track. Every day was something I had to work on mentally to be on track. It hit me that I had nothing left and I only had 2 years. The realization that my squash was over and I needed to let go to allow something else to come into my life.
She's an 8-time world squash champion. Nicole David is a symbol of perseverance, resilience, and reinvention. Recorded live at Nala Kasturi in Central Market, Nicole reflects on her relentless pursuit of excellence, the emotional challenges of stepping away from squash, and how she's channeled her experiences into empowering the next generation through the Nicole David Organisation. This is a story of a champion who never stopped growing, both on and off the court. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here today on a Sunday. I was saying there are a few reasons why I really love you as a person, all your talent and what you've done for the country and sport and that dedication. But mostly it's because you're such a humble person. And
Thanks.
Character is something that, I don't know, you can't teach character. It's something that someone has. So your humility, despite everything you've achieved and that, you're so grounded as an individual. So just wanted to say that.
Thanks so much, Deborah.
But you grew up in a family that was super sporty, right? Your dad was into sports. You were saying that with your siblings, right? You had rackets and balls all around the house growing up. So do you think that was part of why you became such a talented sports person? Did that have a role?
Yeah, because my dad was a former athlete himself. So he was a former football player for Malaysia and he was a goalkeeper for the country. And he played all sports like hockey, athletics. And I think that's where I got it from. We knew that once we get exposure to sport and we just picked up whatever that was near us. And the first thing that I picked up was squash. And with my sisters, my two older sisters, Leanne and Cheryl, they were also people that I wanted to aspire to be because they were my older sisters. So that being the youngest, you just want to be as good as your sisters or better.
The competition.
Yeah, healthy competition. So it was just great to have your sisters involved. We were traveling together, making new friends together. But my mom was an English teacher. So the combination of the two really made it so much more concrete, as in the education front and then the sport front that made us a holistic sort of upbringing. And at the same time, my parents were just there to always take us to the squash courts, take us to any competition, making sure that we are fine with our studying. But they never pressured us to do anything outside of excelling in school or in sport. They just gave us a space to just be good and to just do whatever we can in our own capacity. Yes.
So to say this right, you held the number world rank for 108 months in a row. That's the equivalent of 9 years, guys. 9 years. Can you even fathom what that is? I can't. How? I mean, how did you maintain that streak?
To be honest, I didn't know at the time. I was so busy thinking that I needed to get better. I needed to improve. I was number one, but I'm not good enough. You know, in some ways, I was always thinking I had to improve in all aspects of the game. I wanted to be the all-round squash player that I dreamt of. So every single time, every year, my coach, Liz, she was a great mentor and she knew exactly the areas I needed to improve every year. So if it's 1 year, we want to get better in my technical side, we do that. And that was from the start when I moved over at 18. That's where everything I needed to build from scratch and start all over. But when I got to number one is when I had to put the extra work in. So making myself more physically fitter, making sure everything I'm stronger, technically, tactically, all aspects of the game, I had to be good. Because if I stop for 1 minute, the next person is going to take over. So that was my motivation.
Did it feel exhausting? I don't know, tiring? Like that some things just behind you waiting to take your spot if you let go a little bit?
It was, but I didn't think of it as something tiring. I think it was part of the game. If you want to be good, you had to just put up with it. You had to move forward, work even harder, make that extra steps. Because the whole reason why I did that is to have that buffer above the rest of the pack. So if I was good already and I'm number one, why not I keep getting better and stay there and have the same space and
no one can
so that
catch
they
up.
won't they won't keep up. So if they even tried, and they do, because competition was so important to me that they were pushing some buttons and exposing me in certain things, and I needed to cover those areas to get better. And the minute I covered that, everything just smooth sailing.
Because I remember, I think it was maybe 10 years ago, you came back to Malaysia once and we met up, and I think we were talking about your, was it sports psychologist?
Yes.
So what is the mindset of a high-performing world champion, the mindset of Nicole David to maintain that? There's so much, life happens outside of the squash court. There's other things that you can't control. What state of mind do you have to be in?
It's a conscious effort of trying to stay on track and being positive, taking away negativity. So when I was younger, I used to learn a lot of visualization techniques. Picture my match as like a perfect match and playing it every single point, every single shot. And it's all choreographed in my head. And I practiced it since I was 12 years old. And I did that all throughout my junior career. And that gave me an edge when I got into the professional tour. It is work. It is training. It's like training my physical body. You have to train your mind as well. And if it's not up to par, you're not going to perform on court. So every day was something I had to work on mentally to be on track. So that was what I had to do. It's tiring. So being on the top at 9 years in a row, I kind of had a little break after some point. I just needed to move on to something else after.
So now you're a pro at visualizing. You still use the technique?
I should do it more, but then I kind of got a bit lazy. I did it so much that I got a bit tired, but I should do that more, because any human being, we all have our doubts. We all have our tough times when we go into a little hole and then we think we're not good enough, and then that goes even deeper. But what can help is those visualization stuff, or turning the negative to positive. So if I think of something, I can't do this today, but then I'll have to turn it around almost instantly. If we turn it around, that small bits when we are aware that we are talking negatively to ourselves, those are already those small steps that we can take. And
I feel like a lot of it is it's perspective, right?
Yeah.
It's how you want to see things. You can see things as half empty, half full, or if you say it's bad, it's bad. So it's how you accept it to yourself that matters. Yeah. But I think for all of us, when we look at you, we always see this cool cat, like steady on the court, which I guess is how you have to be, right? When you're competing.
Poker face.
No
Everything is
tell.
happening inside, but you don't want to show your opponent what's going on. You don't want to give them anything to feed off, because we are in the same space.
Yeah. So no smashing rackets and stuff.
No. You try very hard not to. What you do in training is what happens in competition. So I think
that's a good one.
Those athletes that actually smashes their rackets in competition do it in training. So you don't replicate what you do in competition. Yeah.
So you moved to the Netherlands. How old were you? 18?
18,
You were 18 when you moved to the Netherlands. That was this big decision that you wanted to go for gold. This was it, and you needed to be there. But you were still very young. And I'm curious as to how you managed the rest of your life. Did you have a manager with you that helped look at family, finances, how you lived, that other parts of your life were taken care of while you focused on sport?
I really have to say my dad was a big supporter. He was also working as a project manager and civil engineer in Penang. While I was in Amsterdam, he had to take on all my managerial roles in terms of sponsorships or anything that has to do with commitments to obligations in Malaysia. So he taught me so much on how to understand, to read contract. We discuss it through. I'm sitting in the meetings with him. He explains everything, and then he asks me the final decision. What do you want and what to look out for? So all these things were just him guiding me from the very beginning. Even when I was younger as well, he always is very wise. So I have so much to owe to my dad in that aspect. But everything else outside, like my travel, my stay in Amsterdam, my expenses, everything, I had to do it myself, because all the funds come to me to manage in Amsterdam. So I needed to know all my tickets, all my stay in different countries and tournaments, all I had to manage it myself. But everything else that is happening in Malaysia, my dad does it. And at some point, I needed to not give him so much work, because he's working, it's like a full-time job, you know? Right? So I just wanted to take that off him. And when I got a little bit older and more mature, mature, I decided to take it on and find other people that could take a part-time job to work for me, help me with that managerial role. So yeah, but all that experiences really gave me a chance to learn from my dad, and I wanted him to be my dad, because if I were to have a call, I think the first thing he will want to do is to make sure I'm okay. I could just go like, hey, how you doing? And instead of going, oh, let's sort out this sponsorship and let's sign this out. So I wanted to put it separate things, and it's so nice. Right now, I see that made a big difference.
And you're lucky because you hear so many stories of situations like that not working out very well.
Yes.
Right? So you're lucky to be able to have that relationship with your dad still, and the fact that he taught you all that matters.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask you about something that I think a lot of us have read in the papers. We know that sports is a short-lived career. You start off when you're a kid, a teenager, you decide, okay, I want to go for gold. I want to give this a shot. So you hyper-focused on whatever it is that you want to do. You move country for it, may not go to university, may not finish school. So you focus on it. You want to be number one. And that's all that matters at that point in time. But soon after that, whether you've made it into the number one spot, top 10, top 20, whatever it is, eventually you get to a point of retirement. And often that's in your 30s. People are still so young. When a lot of athletes retire, they have no savings. And often, we've read stories in the paper of that people selling nasi lemak on the street side to make their ends meet. It feels like a very sad situation. I don't know if I should call Nicole the anomaly, or you're the 1% or the 0.5%. I'm not sure what that is, right? So how do parents out there that have young children, how do they encourage their children to go into sport if that's what their future could potentially look like?
Yeah, I can only probably share a bit more about my personal experience. In this whole journey, I had Malaysian government to support me all throughout. When I was a young junior at 11 years old, I was in the national training camp, which is the 1998 Camp Jaya. And it was for the Commonwealth Games in Malaysia that they held for the very first time. And squash was introduced then. So that's where money was pumped in to send us off to overseas and have exposure in competitions, and getting all these extra experts like the mental trainer, the nutritionist, or physical trainers. All these people were at my fingertips, and I got a chance to get all this funding to then pursue my career in my juniors and right through till I retired. So I was very grateful that I had that support from the very beginning, and whatever additional that I got was from my sponsors. But the difference of some sports I played a professional sport, so squash has a professional tour. And not many sports, like Olympic sports, actually have a professional tour. They only have an amateur, maybe 5 tournaments in a year that they play, and that's all they got. And they don't get much prize money. So they have to depend on government funding. Hence, Malaysia is one of the very few that has good support in terms of funding their athletes. But if I went anywhere else, I'm the most secured in my squash career than any other squash player I can think of. If I were to stay in another country, they would have no government support. They have to kind of do an extra job. So it's a bit different landscape depending on the sport. I believe that Malaysia is doing really good in supporting our athletes, but it depends on the sport that they go into. And it's not just Malaysia. Globally, this is the landscape. American swimmers are not also getting a lot of money. They have to depend on
private. Is it a lot of private sponsorship?
Yeah, sponsorships. If they get it, if they are probably a top 10 in maybe the US or in the world, but they still won't get the same funds as maybe number one in squash because they're not on a professional tour.
Yeah.
If kids or people want to go into sports, they can really bank on it, but just make the most of having an education on the side. Now, Malaysia and KBS is really understanding these situations where athletes are going full speed, but they don't have the means afterwards. So there is programs for them like MACE, where they take on athletes while they are competing to help them with education or put them into training in workplaces to gain exposure. And then also they are pushing very hard for companies that will employ former athletes. If you're a former athlete, you get benefits for the company. So a lot of things, I think the government's really pushing hard for our athletes that are currently competing to have a means afterwards, and to help them and guide them, to give them education, to give them a place, and also to secure their livelihoods in future.
What was the hardest part of transitioning out of professional squash, moving back to Malaysia, and then starting your foundation?
The hardest part for me was letting go of squash. When I was probably 2 years before I retired, straight after my 8th world title I won in 2014, like I said, something broke inside of me, in my mind. emotionally, I just kind of just lost my edge of the game. And 2 years, I was just in denial. I was just pushing hard, training harder, but nothing seemed to go my way. And after that 2 years, I played a tournament in the US Open and I lost quite early in the rounds. And my coach asked me to really dig deep and ask that question of whether I still want to do this. And I was so emotional afterwards. I thought I answered back straight away. I was like, yeah, I'll play another 5 years, of course. I have 5 years to give. But when I went back to the hotel, it hit me that I had nothing left. And I only had 2 years. And I was so emotional, I was blubbering away in the hotel. And I think I carried on being very emotional for quite some time. But it's the realization that my squash was over and I needed to let go to allow something else to come into my life. I started the process in that year. And while I was competing, I was doing my process. In that moment, I felt that I had space to take things in, to learn. So I was training in Colombia. I had a good friend, Mariana, who's now the CEO and co-founder of my foundation. She was a former squash player. So we caught up and I told her some of my ideas of retiring in 2 years. And she gave me outsider advice saying that, you have so much to offer. Why think that you're only a squash player? You can use this to something so much bigger. So just pick up something new. I'll help you plan and prepare for what's coming. So that's where I started to learn how to speak, learn how to do PowerPoint presentations. A squash player, you don't do that. So all these things, I took those baby steps to learn, and that's where the letting go was easier and the opening my mind to possibilities was so much brighter. The moment I finished that last match in 2019 in the British Open is when I was so happy. I finally could be free and I had a weight lifted off my shoulders that I didn't have any responsibility for squash, but now I can put all my efforts in my future, and that is my foundation.
I can really feel the emotion in your voice when you talk about it. It's just emotionally difficult thing to accept and to transition from something you're just so good at to then move into an area where you're like, how am I going to find myself in this new space, right? To start a foundation in Malaysia, and I feel what you were saying earlier about your family, it's like you package this up and you package this into the foundation, which is now for all these other children, which is such a beautiful thing.
I've always wanted to do a foundation, and that's where that passion of mine to give back in some ways of all the experience I learned in my journey as a squash player. Why keep it to myself? I need to share it with our next generation, our kids. If they had the tools and if they had all these things that I learned from such a young age all throughout my squash, why not get them to understand it as well? So all my tips, my tricks, but it's the easiest thing is just introducing kids and to sport and having access to sport. So that's where the Nicol David Organisation came about, and is to empower girls and boys through sport and education. That was the primary reach, to just give them access to sport. And we gave an after-school program for low to mid-income children, English classes and squash training. We give them like twice a week classes, and we take them from school and we bring them over to our facility in Bukit Jalil. And we have about 143 kids right now, and we launched it 2.5 years ago. It's a great achievement so far, but it's only the beginning. The confidence that you see in these kids when they play squash or they play a sport and they have English to back it up, like a proficient language that they can learn and they can learn with their friends. Having a community, it's something that you just feel so whole. And my parents gave me that same positive environment I grew up in. We want to create that same environment for them as well. And especially Mariana being a great leader in putting all the right guidelines for everyone to know that we are there for our team, for our children. And because we are working with our children so much and we know that they are so important to us, we want to help the ecosystem. So now we've gone into a second pillar of our foundation, which is Ibu Legend. And it's for the mothers of the kids. So we thought we will support the moms first. We give them mental health workshops, free medical checkups, parenting workshops, physical education, nutrition workshop, everything that we can help them to assist them.
How amazing.
And it's so nice to see that they love the whole journey. And we are going to take them into a second phase, which is to give them financial education. Maybe hopefully if they want to become an entrepreneur, they can guide them with that as well. So there's so much going to come in later on.
Yeah, such incredible work. children who say, I want to become like a Nicole David, what would you say to them? What are the next steps you need to do?
Just dream big like I did, once you have a dream in your mind, there's no barriers. And I think that's what my parents gave me, is that they never said that I couldn't do anything. They didn't say, no, you can't do this or you can't do that. They just went, go for it. And they trusted us that we had what it takes inside of us to do it, to make it happen and to work hard for it. And I think hard work is really underestimated nowadays. We say it quite lightly, but I think the meaning of hard work kind of a little
100%.
bit sort of faded slightly. It's just a different context in this day and age. Like you said, everything is all fast. We want everything quick, but you need to see it through. You need to go through the process, and it's a long-term journey. So yeah.
We all know that you were, was it chief de mission
Yeah.
when you were at the recent Olympics in Paris? The deputy chief, right?
Deputy chef,
And so
yeah.
Nicole was with our Olympic team. We were there the entire time, follow them around, the highs, the lows. So what an experience to be there. I'm still like gutted that squash is still not part of the Olympics. But the next Olympics in LA, it's going to be part.
Yes.
So is anyone secretly wondering if Nicole is coming out of retirement? Win our gold for us?
No,
Or is it just
no
me?
chance? Yeah. No. I think I'm way too old to think that I will be playing for another 4 years' time. And this body is not functioning after 5 years of retirement. But we're very proud that squash is there, and our Malaysians can really represent in the squash scene. And we hope that can see a squash player on the podium wherever it is. It's just nice to see that squash is out there at the Olympic Games. I'm so excited.
And I think the incredible work you're doing with your organization, because if you want champions don't happen overnight. Champions
Yeah.
happen through your pipeline, through your Little Legends program. It takes 5, 10, 15 years, right? It's really your story of growth. So thank you for coming back to Malaysia and doing that.
Thank you so much. And yeah. I just want to do as much as I can to give back, and Malaysia has given me so much. So I know for a fact that if I can do just one thing, even though it's a lot of work putting a foundation together, I'm gonna do my best to reach out to as many kids. Hopefully in future you'll see more programs to come. A lot of exciting things to happen. I'm not gonna say anything.
I was watching this video 2 days ago, actually, popped up on my Instagram. It was Adele, and she was talking about character and talent. She just captured it so well, right? She's like, talent, and of course, with someone like you, right? Talent, you have it, you're good at it, but talent's talent, right?
Yeah.
You can use it in whatever way. But then she goes, character. Character is what makes a person, because you can't teach it, you have it. And I come back to the point on excellence, humility, integrity, grace, that it very much like made me think of you, because that really represents someone who has every reason to be biggest athlete of, I think, our time in Malaysia, but the character that I think everyone should aspire to. So thank you for speaking today, and we really enjoyed having you.
Thank you
Ladies
so
and
much for all of your kind words, and it's great to be here on this podcast and with all of you today. Thank you.